My heart hammered in my chest as I entered the conference room. The familiar faces around me were veiled in a fog of forced cordiality, but I knew a nest of intrigue had been woven beneath the surface. "Are you still clinging to that disastrous project?" Anna's voice echoed in my mind, dripping with insinuation. The last thing I needed was another one of her veiled jabs disguised as concern. She didn't realize that the betrayal only strengthened my resolve. Whispered words among colleagues followed me like shadows. Each, I heard, "and tough times for you," accumulated like heavy stones in a sack I carried on my shoulders. Maria, one of my team members, gave me a fleeting, sideways glance. It was as if she was gauging my reaction. I could feel the weight of doubt hanging in the air. In that moment, the butterflies in my stomach turned into focus. "Comment where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far this story is reaching. And if you've gone through something similar, know that you're not alone. Like and subscribe to stay with us." Tension mounted as I sat at the table and prepared my presentation, trying to ignore the echoes of malicious conversations. I wasn't just hearing the murmurs, I was analyzing them. Since my promotion, a resentment had been simmering, a poison slowly eroding the trust I'd built with my team. As my gaze swept across the faces, I noticed the subtle gestures. A shrug here, a furtive glance there. My sister's voice always echoed in my head, versions of insecurity packaged in a false smile, like a queen of rivalry. "You can begin, Helen," said Sergio, my boss's nephew, and one of the most skeptical voices regarding my work. A mixture of expectation and distrust was etched on his features. He was the type of man who tested everyone's mettle, always searching for a hidden weakness. His posture was a challenge and an invitation, and I was about to embark on a battle of words and data. "Thank you, Sergio." I swallowed, nervousness threatening to surface, but I took a deep breath. I maintained my focus. Each slide of the presentation had been meticulously planned, like a strategic attack. I had done my homework. The content was solid, the numbers didn't lie. But looking at Sergio and the rest of the room, I wondered if it would be enough. There was a fine line between showcasing my abilities and exposing vulnerabilities. As I presented the performance data, I noticed how the expressions on my colleagues' faces hardened. Was this the reaction I expected? The way they looked at me made it clear that the distrust wouldn't dissipate easily. "The project was delivered on time and 20% under budget," I declared, my voice echoing in the growing silence. These indicators not only demonstrate efficiency, but also a well-defined process strategy. But amidst the coldness and sidelong glances, a restlessness began to grow within me. If the word betrayer was going to be the only label defining my role here, what could I do? An aggressive approach? No. A robust defense. A dignified defense that would cut through any mud they might throw. The truth, I thought, when well presented, is a powerful weapon. My energy began to flow. Each slide was a blow against the deliberately constructed armor of disbelief. And my sister's betrayal, which I thought might paralyze me, only made me sharper. Anna hadn't realized that her attempt to dim my light had done nothing but ignite my inner flames. For a brief moment, our eyes met. Hers, a reflection of satisfaction, while mine were pure determination. She was testing my strength, my character, and I had a plan, not just to react, but to combat each of her silent attacks. With that, the meeting moved towards its conclusion, and I was determined not to let doubt reign. The result of all this was that I was preparing, not just to confront her, but for a path that could lead me beyond the leadership they so questioned. In a final glance around the table, I realized this battle was only just beginning. I stood up, feeling a sense of clarity. Yes, they could have their uncertainties, but I was not only ready to face them, but also to transform every word spoken into a strategy that would secure my position and, who knows, even more. It was time to begin meticulous planning. Every move would count. I knew the transformation I was undertaking wouldn't be easy, but I was willing and motivated, strengthened by the certainty that every betrayal could be turned into a source of power and determination. From now on, my focus was on duality, on serving as a leader, and on ensuring that the ground I walked on remained firm, despite all the shifting sands. Sometimes memories come as flashes, specters of a past that was once vibrant, but has been buried under distrust and competition. I sit at my desk now, surrounded by stacks of files and reports. But my mind drifts back to those times when Anna and I were more than just sisters. We were partners and confidants. Amidst laughter and confidences, we shared dreams as vast as the sky. I remember us sitting in the kitchen, surrounded by homemade brigadeiros that we prepared together on our childhood afternoons. It was a time when worries about the future seemed as distant as the stars. Back then, Anna confided her insecurities to me. "Why are you always the favorite?" she'd ask, her eyes shining with questioning. I believe, in part, these conversations led me to focus on her aspirations. It was easy for me to ignore the underlying sense of rivalry hidden beneath that desire for connection. I believe we both made a great team, until competition started to replace our camaraderie. When I first received a promotion, her smile, tinged with apprehension, was a familiar sight. At the time, I didn't realize that the joy of celebrating achievements was beginning to fade. The first time we both applied for a management program where each of us could shine was one of the first big steps in our professional relationship. The atmosphere, thick with expectation during the interviews, made the waiting room feel like a magical battlefield of dreams and ambitions. While studying together, Anna hesitantly mentioned, "What if you're better than me, Helen?" And I, seeking to alleviate her fears and reassure her, readily agreed that it didn't make sense. "One day, we'll be side by side at the top," I promised. The innocence of that statement now seems distant. Time passed, and the bonds that united us began to fray. During a family dinner, where every detail should have been festive, the poison of rivalry materialized. Behind a smile, Anna made a cutting remark. "It's easy to get promoted when you're the boss's favorite." Her taunt caused a heavy silence at the table, and I just held my breath. The ensuing stare was a silent ritual of war, where we both waited to see who would move first. Despite trying to ignore these rivalries, every move I made to claim my space seemed to stoke the flames of a competition that never needed to exist. Each of my accomplishments became an echo of her frustration. Therefore, with every step I took up the ladder of success, she drenched our relationship in resentment. And so, I discovered that instead of nurturing the connection we both craved, we were creating a chasm. I envisioned Sergio in my office, his presence clearly testing my capabilities, not just as a professional, but as a person. The first time we met for a presentation, his skepticism was evident. "Do you really think you're ready to lead this project?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. At that moment, it wasn't just a question, but a public test. Every word was a challenge, a suggestion that my worth could be questioned. However, to my surprise and distress, his doubts weren't limited to me. They extended to whispers among the team, which alarmed me even more. What I didn't fail to notice was that his opinion slowly became a driving force. He was inviting me not only to assert myself, but to challenge the expectations I placed on myself. An unwitting partner, he was in his own struggle to balance the expectations of his mother, who loomed like a ghost over family decisions. It was as if, deep down, Sergio wasn't just doubting my ability, but simultaneously allowing himself to explore his own shortcomings. Over time, this uncertainty became a reflection of what I was experiencing, and we found some use for each other's negative energy to transmute it into something productive. Looking back on our journey, I realized that the biggest challenge wasn't the lack of support, but the struggle against a lack of self-belief. The resentment we experienced could never impede our ability to be great. What I desired, more than anything, was to find a way to transform competition into inspiration, and not just into direct rivalry. When I look at Sergio now, there's a new understanding. This relationship we have is a delicate dance, where doubt is nothing more than an invitation to better performance. He doesn't just question my professional ability, but also challenges me to know myself better and use my strategy more incisively. And with that, even when the challenges before me were triggered by Anna, I decided I couldn't ignore them as weak points, but as opportunities to forge strong leadership. A new vision is beginning to emerge. Instead of feeling oppressed by the dark clouds of betrayal and jealousy, I'm determined to turn them into storms that will nourish fertile ground. That's how I see the relationship I've developed with Sergio. He is in some way a mirror of my own aspirations, and the only viable reaction would be to shape this relationship just as I shaped my professional identity. After all, what's at stake is more than just access to respect. It's a new me. I'm ready to transform every moment of tension into a step toward my growth. Every conversation I have with him will become training. Every disagreement, an opportunity for strengthening, as I seek appropriate solutions. The struggle I experience to regain confidence in myself, as well as in my team, is what will guide my destiny. In this way, reviewing everything I've been through, a certainty begins to bloom within me. I am not just a betrayer or a rival. I am a woman reinventing herself, willing to challenge any shadow that threatens the light I intend to ignite. The future will not be forged in the shadows of rivalry or the questioning of a skeptic, but in the truths I will keep and the strength that will emerge from them. And as I reverse the narrative imposed upon me, I will recognize not only the lessons of my past, but the strength to ascend to what I am destined to be. After the emotional storm of the last meeting, I realized I couldn't fix the situation by ignoring the rumors swirling around me. My name was being whispered as a symbol of inefficiency, a target of veiled malice. The only viable answer was action. I knew I needed to unearth the truth behind the whispers circulating among my team and find the source of that poison before it spread further. With this resolution in mind, I started working on a mind map to visualize the team's interactions. My project management skills became my allies at this moment. They allowed me to establish a timeline of team conversations and events, all linked to me and my recent performance. With each connection made, the pieces of the puzzle began to interlock, revealing that it wasn't just childish rivalry. It was something deeper, involving past loyalties and projections of insecurity on the part of Anna and her allies. I decided to approach Mark, an analyst who always demonstrated admirable impartiality, ready to give me the lowdown on the team's atmosphere. He was a crucial contact, someone who could give me a straightforward perspective without the veil of subjectivity. During a coffee break, as we sat in a quiet corner of the break room, I asked the question burning in my mouth. "What are you hearing about me? What are the rumors?" He hesitated for a moment, his expression worried, but sincerity was present in his voice. "Helen, I can't lie. Things are complicated. Anna has been saying you're not up to the job, saying you're just the boss's favorite." His clear and direct tone felt like a stab, but it also had a noticeable dose of candor. I mustered the courage to continue. "Are you saying she's trying to discredit my work?" He nodded, his face somber. "Yeah, it seems that way. And it's not just her. Some people are joining in on those comments. You know, the kind of little jokes that make you seem weak. An attempt to show you shouldn't have gotten this far." His words resonated in my mind like a ticking clock. What could have been a moment of defense was becoming a battlefront. What Anna's insecurity had sown with her words couldn't be erased by a simple apology or a gentle approach. It was time to turn this data into action. I drafted a presentation based on all the information I had gathered. I worked through the night, projecting results and feedback that would not only support the strength of my position, but also highlight everyone's contributions to the team. After all, agile management is based on collective strength and continuous improvement, and that would be my banner. As I organized all the performance charts, I wanted each slide to highlight not only my journey, but also the contribution of everyone who was a part of it. But there was more. For this presentation to be impactful, I needed to win over Sergio. He had become a respected voice in the meeting room, and his support could serve not only as an anchor, but also as a bridge to restore confidence in me. I couldn't just present numbers. I needed him, one of the main critics of my work, to believe in me. I found a moment for a chat, a casual encounter where I found myself pushing the conversation toward the desired outcome. During our chat, I made a conscious effort to initially disguise the tension I felt. "Sergio, can I count on you tomorrow for a presentation I'm preparing?" The request sounded almost timid, something that didn't match my accumulated knowledge over the years. "What do you have in mind?" he asked, crossing his arms, observing me like a hawk. I described the structure I had devised, the main points I wanted to highlight. Each one logically linked to the support needed for the team's future, and for mine. When I finished, he seemed thoughtful. "It could be interesting, but are you ready for what they might say?" Defiantly, I took a deep breath. They're ready to hear the truth. These words hung in the air, representing a point of no return for me. The rumors couldn't continue to float. I needed an impact. If Anna and her group were willing to destroy my image, then I would use that same fire against them. Based on the information I had gathered, the presentation would not only be a way to make myself heard, but a chance to expose the weaknesses and show how my leadership could become a unifying force. I went home that night with a mix of adrenaline and anxiety pulsing inside me. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman who was determined but vulnerable, a woman who acknowledged her light, but didn't ignore the shadows that accompanied her. There was the woman I had become, someone who wouldn't allow herself to be defined by others, but who aspired to build a new narrative. The next morning, a renewed energy filled me as I entered the meeting room. The tension was palpable, but there was an unwavering determination in my approach. The familiar faces of my colleagues were hidden in a fog of uncertainty, and Anna's insinuating glances awaited me. But I had a plan. Everyone would need to hear my truth, and so I was determined to move forward. As the meeting began, I paused and took a deep breath. It was the moment I would not only rise against the doubts that had tried to hold me back, but also strengthen myself with a clear and collective vision. And so, in those first words leading into the presentation, I knew I wouldn't just be fighting for myself, but for all the potential that could emerge from the team. The conference room was enveloped in an intense, almost palpable silence. As I entered, a wave of anxiety mixed with determination washed over me. The presence of my colleagues felt like a battlefield, each one waiting to see who would emerge victorious in this battle of words and data. The atmosphere was thick, but the need to expose the truth and claim my place here surpassed any nervousness. "Good morning, everyone," I began, trying to keep my voice firm and clear, but feeling my heart pounding like a war drum. Today, I'm not just here to discuss numbers. I'm here to present a portrait of our team and what we've achieved together, as well as to address the challenges we face. A variety of expressions appeared on their faces, ranging from curiosity to suspicion. Anna, seated at the table, had a dismissive expression, as if waiting for me to slip up. But I wouldn't let her disdain shake me. I had a plan, and I was determined to follow it. I projected the first slide, which showed a performance graph from the last project, highlighting our productivity and the goals we had achieved. As you can see, we've achieved a significant increase in our efficiency. This isn't a result I achieved alone, but a reflection of everyone's efforts here. Each of you plays a fundamental role in this success. I emphasized this, moving my hand firmly, pointing to the numbers that glowed on the screen. A murmur began to intensify in the room. The dialogue wasn't just about me, but about the health of the group. As I spoke, I noticed that the expressions of some colleagues became more open, more receptive. Starting to transform suspicion into acceptance was vital. Anna, irritated, didn't take long to attack. "But are these numbers really a reflection of your leadership? Do you really think you can lead this team forward when there are so many rumors swirling about your competence?" Her attack was expected, and I was prepared for the defense. "If there are rumors, Anna, it's because we allowed them to fester. That's why I'm here to address this together," I replied, maintaining a firm tone. "We're not here to sabotage each other, but to build on each other's strengths. We must remember that a house divided cannot stand. Listening and dialogue are essential to breaking the cycle of distrust." A few looks seemed to understand the message. The atmosphere began to shift, but resistance remained, and I knew I had to be persuasive. Presenting the next slide, a table of detailed results, I took a moment to breathe. We're all here for a reason. We want to achieve results. Let's talk about how we can raise expectations, not just in the coming months, but throughout the entire year. At that moment, Sergio, who had until then avoided eye contact with me, intervened. Why don't we have regular feedback meetings? Something that would be everyone's responsibility, so we can talk about what's working and what isn't, before it becomes a problem, he suggested, and his voice resonated with a proposal that could serve as a connector. Excellent idea, Sergio. I can work on making that happen. It's all about creating a collaborative space. If we cultivate a supportive environment, we'll solve problems before they become crises, I agreed quickly, seeking to solidify the support I felt forming. Anna, realizing her previous attack was crumbling, pressed again. What if the meetings don't change anything? You'll be right back where you started, debate after debate. Her expression was provocative, a defiant air stamped on her face. If the meetings don't work, then I'll be the first to accept criticism and work on something different, I responded, my voice rising slightly, full of determination. But for that, we need to listen to each other. What I want, Anna, is for all of us to contribute and create a space where concerns aren't just whispered in the hallways, but brought to the table. The interaction intensified, and I knew the weight of the words I was choosing at that moment could impact what followed. Once more, I approached my goal, to expose not only the results, but also the need to embrace a true transformation within the team. I continued the presentation, moving on to the implications of our results. If we achieve a new level of communication, we can truly act as a united team. But I'm also aware that this process requires vulnerability from all of us. Are we willing to allow that to emerge? Trust isn't one-sided. It needs to be cultivated and sustained by every member here. Heads began to nod in agreement, but knowing I still needed explicit support. If we're willing to acknowledge our mistakes, how could anyone doubt our collective will? How can we criticize each other if it is in open criticism that we will find the light necessary to reshape ourselves? Anna was now attentive, a little more tense. The words became a resonant echo in the room. And, as if having received a cue from the audience, 2 or 3 other colleagues began to offer small supportive opinions. The mood was shifting even further. The presentation continued with a visualization of how a change in attitude and behavior could leverage everyone toward success. Each graph and each number reinforced the idea that everyone was part of the picture, each with their role in the synergy. At the end of next quarter, I want to see each of you invested in this process. A new beginning depends on us. I reached the climax of the presentation, where the feedback data would match the statistics we had collected. These numbers highlight a 30% increase in positive evaluations since we started communicating better. This is just the beginning, a preview of what we can create together. That was the point where a transformation was echoing. Skepticism still lingered around Anna, but the growing support among her colleagues was palpable. So, in closing, I added, and remember, the path ahead wasn't meant to be walked alone, but as an ambitious collective. Together, we can reach great heights and change this narrative. At that moment, I looked around the room. Although the message of encouragement had been sent, there was still an unsettling tension between Anna's hostility and the vulnerability accumulating in the others. Anna finally, seemingly without inspiration, met everyone's gaze. The silent challenge was etched on her face. She, and everyone else, was able to perceive that what was in the room was the result of the direct confrontation that was necessary. Leaving the meeting, a mixture of relief and exhaustion bubbled inside me. The tremor of the declaration still reverberated in my body, but I knew the battle wasn't won. In fact, the war had only begun to be subtly provoked. The informal interaction between colleagues was growing, and this created a new expectation, a promise that change was possible. And bumping into Sergio on the way out, his words flowed. "You did it, Helen. Your point was made. Now, the path is ours." The light in his eyes reflected a new connection between us. The effort had been worth it. Remembering everything I'd been through, I couldn't ignore Anna's constant presence in my mind. The front line wasn't clear yet, but the movement of support was starting to gain traction. The battle for my space was far from over. The battle for team unity was just beginning. Carrying this determination, I walked through the room, feeling that each step brought me closer to the fight for justice and respect, for myself and those who were already uniting. I wasn't alone, but more than that, we were building a new bond, a strong bond that wouldn't break easily in an invisible battle. And so, we prepared for what could be the biggest challenge, not just for our relationship, but for the team as a whole. And, at the core of these interactions, a promising new force began to emerge. In the days following the meeting, a wave of renewal permeated the team. Our meetings became more frequent and lively, the interactions more open. I invited everyone to participate in feedback workshops, and the company, receptive to the new approach, had coordinated a space for us to gather and discuss our challenges. The wall between distrust and dialogue gradually began to crumble, but inside me, the shadow of Anna persisted. Her interactions, once subtle, now became more calculated and dissimulated. She watched from afar, like a beast in its lair, ready to strike at any moment. For everyone else, there was a renewed air of collaboration, but I felt she still harbored a silent resistance, plotting her next moves. Every word she spoke during meetings had an ironic tone, as if she were trying to regain her power. It wasn't just about me. It was about the fight for the position she so desperately craved. I realized that even with the vibrant colors of the new connection emerging between colleagues, the fissures were limited. Her other attempts to discredit my work usually served only to keep me on my toes. There was a cloud of uncertainty hanging over the team. If I failed to recognize it now, it could become a bigger problem later. I needed to discover what was truly happening behind the messages that resembled whispered poison. Following my instincts, I began to conduct a more in-depth analysis on my own. Together with Mark, I decided to map Anna's continuous interactions inside and outside of meetings. Using what I knew about her modus operandi, I charted a network connecting each person who spoke with her and her influence on the meetings. The result was, to my surprise, a much clearer structure than I had imagined. One Friday night, while analyzing the data on my laptop screens, I noticed something that unsettled me. Anna had cultivated a small clique among some colleagues, mediating her comments, all with a closer relationship to her. But what really caught my attention was a name: Sophia, a new member of the team, who had joined us during the last project. She not only shared similar ideas to Anna's, but frequently became a spokesperson for her insinuations. It was as if she was doing her dirty work, helping to fuel the atmosphere of distrust. What's going on here? I thought. If Anna was trying to discredit me directly, the matrix of opinions, based on lies and half-truths, needed to be broken before it influenced everyone. The group that had formed around Anna didn't see themselves as a threat until then. Trust had settled in, but there was much more at stake. I needed to open everyone's eyes to what they were allowing to be cultivated under their noses. I decided it was time to confront the situation. I began planning a new meeting, which wouldn't focus only on past results, but on the need to strengthen the trust and collaborative spirit that had consolidated. At the same time, I needed to investigate the underlying issues, to find out what Anna was really doing. I would create a safe space where members could speak and express their concerns about Anna's interactions, without fear of retaliation. I set up the meeting for a Wednesday. I chose a location outside the office that was more informal, a cozy cafe where we could discuss openly. I invited all the team members, but once again, I specified that the new member, Sophia, shouldn't participate. She was at the center of the issue and couldn't interfere in that discussion. That false sense of camaraderie had broken the feeling that everyone was equal. When I arrived at the cafe, I found a lively atmosphere, my colleagues' faces illuminated by conversation. But I quickly noticed an underlying tension in their interactions, especially in Anna's reactions, who decided to show up. She sat at one of the tables, far from me, but her presence resonated in every center of attention. "Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming," I began, trying to break the ice. "Today, we won't have a presentation. Instead, we want to talk about how we feel about the team dynamics and how we can move forward." The atmosphere started to warm up, but soon the tension between Anna and me became a heavy atmosphere. Starting these dialogues is very important to strengthen our bonds. We all know that some kind of rivalry has recently emerged. "Anna, I think we can clarify some things. My gaze directed directly at her aroused the interest of the others. Anna immediately defended herself. "What do you mean, Helen? Rivalry? I'm not the one sowing these disagreements. This is a common problem in every team, you know." Her response was quick, but she was trying to deny the very nature of her influence. "It's not just about you, but the impact you're having on the team. And how everyone here feels," I replied, using an approach that tried not to be confrontational, but sought to open a dialogue. "I want to understand what we can do to create a productive environment again." At that moment, murmurs began to arise. Janildo, one of the most respected analysts, who always had a more practical approach, raised his voice. "Actually, it's true. The atmosphere has become a bit heavier, and we can't ignore it. What you're saying, Helen, makes sense, and this can't be a taboo for us." The battle was unfolding. Anna watched, clearly uncomfortable, but I noticed that others began to agree with the narrative that a collective reassessment was absolutely necessary. It turned into a wave of voices calling for space for open discussions and transparent treatment. However, on that path of dialogue, I couldn't ignore Sophia's behavior, who was sitting in a corner and observing everything. She seemed as confused as she was defensive. Anna, realizing that her tactics were becoming less and less successful, began to try to shift the pressure to Sophia. After some time, driven by a surge of courage, I asked Sophia directly, "What's your perception of the dynamic that's forming? Do you feel there's something that needs to be said?" The direct interaction with her shocked her, but her expression was sincere as she replied, I just didn't know what to do. Anna is a strong figure, and I thought I could help. But I didn't want to create problems. I was just trying to fit in." Her vulnerability caused the atmosphere to soften and a murmur to cross the room. Anna, realizing that the tide was turning, immediately tried to intervene, but it was too late. The group was mobilized around the honesty that had emerged, and I wouldn't let Anna take the lead again. If we're willing to work together to bridge the gaps, then we need to be honest. Christina just hit the nail on the head. We're not here to point fingers, but we need to face the true reasons behind our apprehension. If any of us allow these uncertainties to take hold, we're simply allowing what divides us to grow. I didn't fail to look at Anna as I spoke, hammering home the point. The atmosphere in the room had changed. It was no longer about an explicit rivalry between Anna and me, but about a revelation of fragility. Presenting what was happening around us became a safe space for everyone. Voices rose in a way I had never expected. As the conversation became healthier, a genuine connection began to emerge. Anna seemed to start to close herself off. And then, for the first time, she requested that everyone speak openly and be willing to reflect. At first, many hesitated, but generous responses began to flow. Anna, however, was astute enough to understand that she had lost control of the group. She cast a merciless glance in my direction, as if she thought I was the source of all the confusion that had settled in. But the truth was that what was happening in our team was a reflection of what needed to be aired. When the conversation reached its climax, I could feel a breath of hope. The dialogue was now settling where people began to mention the need for unity and support, and it seemed that even Anna was beginning to open up to this idea. The heat of the contrariety was dissipating. A new bond was being created. Thus, at the close of that afternoon, although the clash had been agonizing, it became clear that that battle would not be a fight between me and Anna, but a common fight for what is right in a work environment. It was a new perspective not only for me, but for everyone who was ready to grow. At that moment, as each of us left the cafe, I felt ready to face whatever was necessary to preserve this new hope. The light of the struggle was emerging, and in the heat of it all, a genuine connection was forming. The battle for unity was not yet won, but at least it had become a collective effort. I knew the war wouldn't end so quickly, but at that moment, the first victory for truth and the building of a strong team seemed within reach. Together, we would be ready to face Anna in a united, resolute, and mutually supportive way. The roots of trust were beginning to take hold, and nothing could be done to stop it. With the renewed energy that had emerged from the last meeting, I decided I couldn't let that flame die out. I needed to act quickly to consolidate this new disposition within the group. I knew that the process of unity would require sustained commitment, and I took this as a personal mission. I invited all team members to meet weekly, focusing on open discussions and the development of our collective skills. In the first post-meeting session, the room seemed fuller than ever. Everyone was willing to contribute and learn. The atmosphere was, for the most part, light, but there was still an echo of tension. I knew this tension was related to Anna, who, despite an apparent silence, continued to observe from her corner like a lurking predator. Her reactions were carefully calculated. She was not an opponent to be underestimated. "Let's start today with a conversation about how we can work more effectively as a team," I said, using a collaborative approach. "I'd like to hear everyone's suggestions on how we can best support each other." As an IT project manager, my role was not only to lead, but also to foster a space where everyone could feel valued. The first ideas began to emerge. Others spoke up, sharing past successful experiences, emphasizing the importance of continuous feedback and open communication. Anna, who had been observing, seemed a little uncomfortable, as if her own wisdom were being challenged. "Can I suggest a quick game to lighten the mood?" Janildo, one of my more easygoing colleagues, proposed. "An icebreaker exercise that might help everyone feel more comfortable." On impulse, I paused, unsure if Anna would accept something more fun in a situation that was starting to become a battleground. The tension was palpable. But, as if a relief valve had been pressed, the dynamic began to shift. Everyone was laughing and moving, quickly engaging in the new exercise. As laughter filled the room, I noticed a change in my colleagues' expressions. The renewed energy was settling in, but Anna still didn't seem willing to give up. She was limiting herself to quick observations, but with each interaction involving someone in the group, that layer of distrust began to crumble. After the exercise, I returned to the main topic. "I'm noticing a positive shift in everyone's interactions. What do you think could be improved?" The focus was on the team, and the response was remarkable. Colleagues began to openly discuss how they could contribute to better communication. Anna finally decided to speak, a mask of control on her face. "Right, Helen. This is all very nice, but what about actual performance? Are you really prepared to accept criticism and improve your results?" Her voice was full of disdain, as if she wanted to return to the same point she had previously fought against. "Yes, Anna, that's part of what we're discussing," I replied, maintaining my composure. "If we don't get results, we'll need to address them collectively. That's our commitment as a team." However, throughout the week, Anna changed tactics and began encouraging some of our colleagues, like Sophia, to join her in her fight against me. Sophia seemed hesitant at first, but Anna was persuasive and charming. She made small talk and tried to undermine the newly gained trust, always positioning herself as the most experienced and wise in the group. Weeks passed, and the atmosphere in our team followed a dual pattern. While we were establishing an open and honest dialogue, Anna's presence and her influence over Sophia began to create fissures. Discussions frequently stumbled into provocative sarcasm and subtle put-downs. It was an uncomfortable and challenging environment. I worked to maintain unity, but I knew that Anna's malevolent impact couldn't be dismissed. One night, I decided to gather more information about Anna's interactions and her statements regarding the group. I reconstructed the pattern of some comments and realized it was time to act. Meeting with Mark, I asked him to pay attention to what Anna would do. "We need to be prepared for any move she makes. She's fermenting a new type of resistance among others, and this could destabilize us," I said, delving into that insecurity that seemed to be growing. A week later, I had a casual conversation with one of my colleagues outside the office, a good friend who used to be quite perceptive. "Helen, I don't want to worry you, but I've noticed an unusual movement between Anna and Sophia. They're always talking privately." His tone was cautious, but it alerted me. What I already suspected now gained more clarity. "Thank you for letting me know. I'll double my attention to what's going on," I replied, aware that I needed to change my approach. "We need to ensure that any shadowy discourse is explicit, and that we don't allow it to grow in the shadow of our unity. The battle was becoming increasingly insistent, a deeper clash between light and darkness. That same night, I decided the best course of action would be to confront the situation directly. I invited Anna to a private conversation, in a cordial way that often hides deliberate tension. The meeting was scheduled so we could discuss the concerns that were emerging. When we met, my expectation was for a disarming conversation. But as soon as she sat down, it became clear that the tension between us hadn't dissipated. "Helen, what do you want to discuss?" she asked, as if preparing for an attack. "I'm concerned about the team dynamic," I began, trying to keep my tone gentle. "I feel that some comments you've made in recent meetings have affected the group, and we need to ensure everyone feels heard." It was an invitation to honesty. Anna crossed her arms, her eyes piercing. "You're looking at this from an emotional perspective, aren't you? People should learn to handle criticism and be challenged to improve, and that means overcoming any resistance within the team." "Yes, but criticism shouldn't become an attack. We need to build with everyone. An internal rivalry not only distracts us from progress, but also opens the door to unnecessary questioning of our results." I doubted this approach would work, but I had no other alternative. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're really putting yourself on this moral high ground, aren't you, Helen? The one feeling threatened isn't me, it's you. Your subtle approach only creates a precarious and dangerous environment. You need me, and that's very clear." A palpable tension hung between us, and for the first time, I realized she might be feeling threatened by the momentum we were building. The fire in her eyes was fury, but also a sign she knew she was losing control. At that moment, a plan began to form in my mind. I couldn't let her manipulate things from the shadows and create irreparable divisions. She needed to know that the team not only had to work in harmony, it was vital they recognize her attempts at destabilization. "Anna, the mask of leadership needs to be genuine. If you intend to be part of a team, we need to strive for a mutually beneficial connection, not just your own self-interest." She seemed to hesitate. The confrontation had given her a different perspective, an understanding of how the situation could play out as trust began to erode among colleagues. "Be careful, Helen. What you perceive as a secret game might be simpler than you think. Remember, I also have my position and respect for what I've already built." The caution in her words returned with a hint of threat. Respect can't mean superiority, and you know it. There's a core of trust that's been established in the team. If you want to control what we're building, then we'll need to discuss this openly as a group. There will be no secrets among us if we want to move forward. And yes, Anna, the borrowed suits of oppressive leadership won't work in this collective. I knew my position was risky, but the feeling of moving towards the truth was stronger. The conversation ended with tense silence, but at least I knew I had begun to shed light on the darkness. I hadn't let it pass in silence. In fact, I had paved a way by bringing this battle into the open. And so, as the atmosphere remained tense, I found the necessary tools and strategies for our success. The following weeks would be crucial, and the battle for unity would require an authenticity that would break through. There was no more room for shadows or exclusionary ambitions. I was focused not only on protecting what we had achieved, but ensuring I didn't lose connection with the team. Now, more than ever, the core of the struggle lay in keeping the light warm, even if some remained in the shadows. The battle for unity would be arduous, but my determination would make it worthwhile and worthy of pursuit. In the days following the confrontation with Anna, a sense of renewal permeated the team. Meetings became more collaborative and open because honesty was finally being encouraged. However, Anna's shadow still loomed over us. The atmosphere was thick with palpable tension, as if at any moment a new explosion of rivalry might occur. Defying the mood, I organized a meeting at a cafe, away from the formal office environment. This cozy space could help break down barriers and allow everyone to speak openly. I invited the team but left Anna out, as I needed a safe space for authentic conversations. As my colleagues began to arrive, the energy was light, but there was nervousness in the air. I provided a space for them to share their experiences, vulnerabilities, and learnings. To my surprise, Sophia, A new team member who had seemed hesitant raised her hand and said, "Sometimes I feel like I don't belong here. It's hard to see the tension, and suddenly I feel pulled to the side." Her comment opened the door for powerful dialogue. Others now began to speak up, sharing their challenges and insecurities. What began as a circle of distrust quickly transformed into a genuine support network. Faces that had been tense now lit up with empathy. Anna, who had been observing from a distance, soon approached. This time, she didn't have the same defensive posture. Instead, her eyes reflected a mixture of curiosity and doubt. "What's going on here?" she asked, trying to maintain an air of control. In the face of general expectation, I spoke calmly. "We're discussing how we can work together more effectively. These comments are essential to understanding how we feel as a team." Anna hesitated. Then, to my surprise, she began to open up. "I also feel insecure sometimes," she confessed, proceeding to recount a story of past failures that had haunted her. Her words brought a new level of vulnerability to the conversation. At that moment, I realized her willingness to yield was beginning to create a productive space. Her authenticity made others feel comfortable sharing as well. Conversations flowed more easily. Complaints were directly discussed, and not just whispered in the hallways. The meeting progressed surprisingly well, and at the end, I said, "If we're willing to open our hearts, we can break down these barriers separating us and build a spirit of unity." The team was now united, and the disagreements began to dissipate. However, the battle wasn't over. A part of me knew Anna hadn't given up yet. While the meeting had been positive, a new challenge awaited. The changes that had begun within the team also needed to be sustained with concrete actions so they wouldn't be lost. In the following weeks, I organized regular feedback sessions where any team member could speak up. What I didn't expect was Anna's resistance manifesting in whispered comments during meetings. Small verbal attacks and sarcastic remarks began to resurface, and the team seemed to be fracturing again. For every positive gesture I promoted, she was there, undermining me. At one such meeting, Anna directly criticized an idea someone had presented. "This simply wouldn't work. If we continue like this, we'll be stuck in a never-ending cycle of failure. It seems like we're giving up on competitiveness," she said, with a clear air of disdain. The room froze, and I knew I had to act firmly. "Anna, striving for a safe space doesn't mean we're giving up on quality or ambition. In fact, it's precisely this that allows us to grow. We need an environment that fosters us, not constant rivalry. It's time to recognize that working together is the real competition that matters." The air in the room was thick with anticipation as I spoke, but this left me with a renewed sense of determination. I further shifted the team's momentum, implementing team-building activities aimed at strengthening the bonds between everyone. Over the days, I noticed a new spirit among the people. What had once divided us now brought us closer. As new dynamics took hold, it became clear that not everyone was yet brave enough to face the truth. The battle for unity would require patience and persistence. I remained focused on creating a team where everyone felt safe to express their concerns. Anna still maintained a defensive posture, but the strength of the group was solidifying around new seeds of trust. The path to true unity wasn't easy, but each step forward made me more steadfast in my determination. In this new reality we found ourselves in, the echo of old rivalries seemed to be fading, but we knew the threat of division still existed. We needed to remain vigilant, ready to deal with the shadows and continue fighting for the light we were cultivating. The battle for unity was far from over, but somewhere, with each passing day, I glimpsed a radiant hope. In the strength of the team we had cemented, it wasn't just a matter of competition, but of partnerships. Thus it was time to move forward. It was time to embrace what we had achieved and fight for a future that was truly ours.